welcome to VistaTalks, interesting discussions with interesting people from all around the world. I'm your host for today, Simon Hodgkins. Today, really thrilled to be catching up with an industry visionary, Kevin O'Donnell. You're very welcome to the show, an expert in international expansion, revenue acceleration, and of course, cutting-edge localization strategies. For those of you that don't know, Kevin spent over 2 decades at this stage shaping the global landscape. He's held pivotal roles at tech giants such as Microsoft, Dropbox, Nitro, just to name a few. Kevin's passion, I know, lies in helping these B2B SaaS type companies achieve this exponential growth and, of course, beyond borders. So, Kevin, you're very welcome to VistaTalks today.
Thank you, Simon. Delighted to chat with you today.
Well, let's get into it, Kevin. I mean, you're the founder now of something called Global 10X. Maybe it would be a good idea to start with you explaining a bit about what Global 10X is, how you got involved with this business, and what sort of areas are you focused in? Because I think there'll be a particular interest with our international audience.
Yeah, happy to. So I'm working with mostly B2B companies on a fractional or advisory basis to help them improve their international go-to-market, to grow market share and revenue internationally. And the reason I started this is because I identified a blind spot for so many companies. They expand internationally, they may localize, they may hire sales teams, they may go to many different markets, but then they're often surprised when they see their revenue growth rates quite slow, or they hit a plateau very quickly, and they wonder, why are we not breaking through? Why are we not getting the level of revenue that we see in the domestic market, usually the US? And what they often forget is it takes them years to achieve product market fit in the US, and it takes them years of identifying the right package, the right pricing, the right go-to-market strategy. And so going internationally is far more than localizing. You know, it requires a lot of barriers to be broken, friction to be removed, adaptation to be made. But a lot of companies that have strong US-centric DNA, they don't know where they should start or what level of adaptation is needed for international success. So I want to help them with that. I want to help them achieve that growth and get to their customers that they can see internationally.
Makes a lot of sense. And thank you for sharing that context, Kevin. And let's get into that a little bit more, maybe unpack that a bit more then, because as organizations create that international expansion strategy, whether they're sort of headquartered in the US or anywhere else on the planet for that matter, as you say, it goes further than just localization. But how do you go about starting to advise companies in this area? What are some of the steps or some of the conversations you find yourself having with these organizations?
Yeah, there's a couple of different ways to approach it. I think it has to start with the company's strategy and ambition. So an international strategy should amplify the core company strategy. It shouldn't be separate. It shouldn't be restricted to one small pocket of a company. It needs to amplify it. It needs to be a manner to diversify their operations and success in multiple markets. So how I would start is help them to figure out their objective for international success. Is it revenue growth? Is it market share? Is it brand awareness? Or is it a combination of those? And so having a very specific objective is essential. Otherwise, they're just going to peanut butter their approach to expansion and grow a little bit in many different ways, but not really achieve true success. Secondly, it's worth thinking through the scope that they want to target. So who is their target customer? And in many ways, the customer will be different from their domestic customer. So if you're a SaaS company targeting tax preparers in the US, you may by default target tax preparers in Japan or Germany or Italy. However, through some research, you might find actually your target customer should be the accountant in small business, not necessarily an independent tax preparer. And that subtle shift will make all the difference from your go-to-market. So understanding the appropriate customer, understanding the markets where you can be successful, the maturity of those markets, the growth trajectory of those markets, how you will go to market. Will you do it all yourselves? Will you outsource some work? Will you have an in-market sales team? How will you adapt your pricing? So once you actually declare your intention, there's so many questions to be unpacked after that. And then finally, I will get the companies to think about their advantage. So what can they bring to the table that will help them win in Japan or Brazil or Argentina or wherever they want to have that success? Is it through localization? Is it through branding? Is it through customer experience? Is it through finance? Maybe they can leverage their way into the market, or something else, such as local talent or IP. But having a strong position on that and being declarative is much more likely to lead to a successful beginning.
I really like what you're saying there because you've taken it right back to the initial strategy, and it's refreshing to hear that localization is one element of what this organization may need, because there are lots of different levers that need to be addressed potentially, and it's sometimes it's not just one or two things. It can be a combination of things that need to be pulled together. So thanks for sharing that more strategic approach that you take with your customers. And it brings me nicely back to the localization question, because I know you wrote recently about 5 steps that localization teams can find themselves trapped in. We don't have to go through each step, but it would be good maybe for you to share a little bit about your insights here, because localization teams can often find themselves trapped in this sort of cycle of almost constant production work. Could you maybe cover that a little bit for us?
Yeah, it's such a common scenario. I see it in almost every organization I work with that has a localization team. And it's ironic, the most successful localization teams often have the biggest problem because they tend to deliver on time and on budget. There's an expectation for them to do more, and that can be a never-ending cycle. And they often are expected to do even more with less resources. And so that pressure to become ever more efficient means they're stuck in execution mode all the time. And so many localization teams see the extra value they can bring, but aren't sure how to make it happen or how to create room for that. So even the most busy under pressure localization teams, I think there's a couple of things they can try, and I would encourage them to give any of these a go. To begin with, push back on low priority localization requests. So not everything is of equal priority. Sometimes it can feel that way, but if you don't have a matrix to determine your priority of work, then the risk is you will give everything the same level of attention. But you should be giving most of your time to the most important pieces of work. And things that are less important, maybe they can be delayed, deferred, or maybe you can repurpose the budget for something more important. So having that conversation and thinking through what needs higher quality, what needs more attention, what needs higher touch point, that's a great way to start. And that can free up some time and some effort. And beyond that, I would say talk to your stakeholders and ask them how are they measuring success of this localization work. So it's very easy to simply localize everything you're asked to do. So marketing team shows up and says, we have this market report we need localized into 5 languages. That's a fine thing to do. But what if you ask them how will they measure success of that? Most marketing teams measure success in terms of marketing qualified leads or LTV to CAC or something like that. And if they don't have a strong understanding of how the localization of this report will lead to that, that's an opportunity to have a conversation and to say, we might have an idea for a better approach. What if we don't localize all of these market reports you're giving us? We think we can help you with your SEO strategy and localizing the keywords, or we think we can help you adapt a marketing campaign for some of your higher priority markets. So subtly changing the conversation there can be an interesting thing to do. Another point I would say is think about the international white space opportunities. So the localization team is in the unique position that they may be the only people in an organization thinking about the international customer every single day. Hopefully they're not, but in many companies they are, frankly. And so they can leverage that opportunity to really understand the journey that their international customers have to go through. So they could do a walkthrough of the product in a different language using a different IP. They can really understand the pitfalls and the gaps in the experience that they must encounter, and then start sharing and advocating and becoming a champion for the localization or for the international user. And that can take the case of a did you know, or a show and tell, or creating a video, or just even highlighting some of the points that other teams may not realize, that users in Mexico have 10 times slower download speeds, and that's impacting them in a certain way. And that means we're not seeing the level of sign up we expected there. So identifying things that might be strong blind spots for the company, they can really start looking into.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, because that cycle that we were talking about there is exactly what you describe. It's do more, do more, do more, do more with less. And sometimes that doesn't allow the time for you to investigate that more strategic approach, where actually focusing on the what's important rather than the what's urgent. Now, I know it's easy to say, maybe push back a little bit. Sometimes it can be a little tricky in that area, but I think it's sage advice, because, often as you say, that the localization people, the language experts, the people doing these sort of reviews are thinking about that international customer. They're thinking about the cultural nuances on a daily basis. And yes, we all hope that others in the organization are doing that, but often these are the people that can actually offer the most useful advice that can help you reach that intended audience, or at least focus on the areas that will improve the success of a particular campaign. So thanks for sharing that, Kevin. Very insightful. And it brings me on to something nicely that I wanted to maybe tease out a little bit more, which is, from your vantage point, from all your experience, and from what you're doing in the organization today, you're obviously helping companies modernize their localization processes, right? And from your vantage point, there's got to be some ways that companies can maybe upgrade their process to make things better, to make things easier. But, from your perspective, are there some sort of common things that people are getting wrong here, or how can companies upgrade their processes to make them more effective, more efficient?
Yeah, there's a lot they can do. And I would say, generally speaking, localization teams are very good at this. Like going back to our last conversation, they're so busy, they have no choice but to modernize and to make their processes more efficient and effective. However, sometimes it can happen in a bit of a vacuum. They may do process improvement for the sake of improving the process. And so there's no particular end in sight. It's just an iterative, continual improvement. And that can be useful in terms of increasing throughput, improving quality. That can be generally helpful. But it's worth having a strong goal about what you want to achieve here. So why are you aiming to improve your process? So are you doing this because you want to move from supporting 20 languages to 50 languages? That's a good goal to enable with no change in resources. Or maybe you want to change your turnaround time from a week to a day. That's another really strong goal that you can aim for. And then you can work backwards from that goal. So understanding why you're improving process and having clarity around that is where to start. And then beyond that, it's a case of almost taking a leaf out of how product teams plan their work. So I would encourage localization teams to build a roadmap for their process improvement. So think about what is needed to put in place on this roadmap of 3 to 6 months. And it could be better use of technology. So are you using all the modern technologies that are available to you internally or externally? Are you leveraging your supplier as effectively as you can? Often, I think suppliers are underutilized from a strategic and technical point of view, when they can bring best practices and they can bring ideas from other clients that they work with. That's not used enough, in my opinion. And when you have a roadmap with key targets and milestones in mind, then you can start layering in either the supports you need. That might be support from external teams, from internal teams, from platform teams, from engineering teams that have to change something to help you. And then start having clear milestones along this journey to improve your automation, to improve your quality. I will say the problems rarely change between localization team. They either want to improve their quality, reduce the manual touch points, or improve the turnaround time and the throughput. It's usually a combination of those. It's just a matter of lining up the technology and the process solutions in the right order to make it happen.
Makes a lot of sense, Kevin. And look, I don't suppose we will get through this conversation because we're talking about strategy and localization without bringing in the topic of artificial intelligence. Okay. It is a hot topic. There are changes coming literally every month in the AI landscape. And obviously, with the advent of artificial intelligence, it's obviously impacting and shaping the localization industry, whether that's from a strategy perspective or whether it's from a process perspective. From your view, again, what are some of the opportunities and challenges you're seeing? Is AI presenting, these great opportunities for language services? We often talk about humans in the loop and the quality and the bias and the hallucinations. What's your view, Kevin, from an AI perspective and its impacts?
I think it's undoubtedly going to be a huge opportunity for sure. I think we're still in the early hype stage around AI when people are excited by the possibility, but not entirely sure how things will shake out. And so it's many companies are taking a watch and wait approach. I think for parallels, it's useful to think about some other big paradigm shifts, such as processing power, which moved from being expensive and scarce, and when we could only run applications on mainframes, to desktops, to now on a phone in your pocket, or bandwidth, which was equally scarce and limited. It becomes almost ubiquitous and nearly free now, and that allowed us to run new web-based applications and different type of interactions. So for AI, it's worth thinking what will become ubiquitous and almost free with this advent. And one example would be large language models. Today, very difficult to create. They're out of reach for many companies. They will become much more commonplace. So what will that allow us to do? What can we build on top of that? And I would always advocate companies think about going back to first principles. Again, rather than sprinkling AI as some magic sauce on top of an existing application, which is how often you see it, actually think about what it enables you to do that you could not do before. So what are the classic problems you have, which is typically around delivering a near native customer experience in every language, in every market. So if that's the holy grail of what you want to achieve, how can you do that better, faster, cheaper, in a more customized fashion with AI? And certainly, it's going to raise the floor on the level of quality that can be delivered internationally. So it's going to make good quality localization commonplace everywhere, which is still not the case. And so many times I come across either terrible localization or unlocalized experiences. That will be eliminated. And if that's eliminated, we need to think about what can we do to differentiate? What can we do to add some extra value on top? And that's where the innovation comes in. So I think it's an opportunity and a challenge. The challenge, I would suggest, for a lot of language-based companies is the risk of being disrupted. So if they are not paying attention to the opportunity, if they're not experimenting, investing, trying different ideas, somebody will come along with an idea, with something to take over here. Um, and secondly, if they're not becoming thought leaders in their field, then their clients are going to look elsewhere, because many clients are looking to localization providers as the leaders, as somebody who can express, I have a strong opinion about how this can be used or how it cannot be used. I mean, it's not going to be a panacea in the next 6 to 12 months. The use of machine translation is a form of AI already. So, actually implementing that is a great start, but there's so much more that can be done. And having that thought leadership presence is key. I see many companies struggle to do that or take a very wait and see approach. And I think that might be costly.
What I really like about what you're saying there, Kevin, is you're still applying this practice of getting underneath how the AI can actually help you improve and identifying those key areas. And I love the little picture you painted of, just sprinkling the AI magic or the AI sauce, I think you said, across everything. And we've seen that, haven't we? We've seen even the biggest companies on the world. There was almost this race to bake AI into literally every service offering that they had. I'm not saying that's a bad thing or a good thing, but what I am saying is I'd really like your approach to thinking about, well, what is the area that's going to help us? What elements of it should we introduce? And just going back to something else that you said, if I can, I really liked your comment about the roadmap when it came to improving processes, because it reminded me of companies and organizations that are on that maturity sort of growth path. They're trying to improve their localization maturity. And it isn't something that you have to do overnight. And I think AI, as you said, you use the term hype cycle. We get very excited very, very quickly when actually maybe the tortoise beats the hare in this race, because you're thinking, not necessarily in a slow way, but you're thinking about what's the best use? How can we move, continually improve over a period of time, back to that roadmap analogy. So I really like that. Thank you for your insights there, Kevin. And also, you know, you're obviously an expert when it comes to strategy and localization and all things when it comes to helping organizations grow successfully internationally. So you must have some success stories or maybe some examples you can share with us, or just valuable lessons from your career that maybe would help some of the people watching or listening to this episode today. Is there anything that springs to mind when I ask you that question?
Yeah, there's a really small growth experiment that comes to mind from one of my former companies. And I like this story because it's a relatively small, self-contained one, but it demonstrates the value of even bringing small improvements to the international experience can have big implications. So this was a SaaS product with a classic pricing page, and in the corner there was an interactive chat box. You see it on most pricing pages nowadays. What was interesting is that there was a real human behind it. It wasn't an AI or wasn't an automated response, but all of the prompts were unlocalized for different languages. So you might be on the French website, but the greeting was in English, similarly for Korean and Japanese and so on. So our customers had no idea that if they interacted, there was a real human there who would speak their language. So we had a French support agent, for example, but you would not know that. So the level of engagement was very low, and we proved that when the engagement was higher, there was a much higher chance of buying the product. So we did an experiment where we localized the greetings and we actually trans-created them. We adapted them for each market, the specific greetings that popped up on each page. And then we measured the impact before and after. And for when we localized the greetings, we saw almost a 200% increase in the level of engagement in that interaction. And then consequently, we saw much higher rates of uptick in products being purchased on that page because they got the information they wanted. And it was, in hindsight, such an obvious thing to do, but it was, again, one of these blind spots that exists. It was something that was not considered a high priority part of the landscape to localize at the time. But because it was this gap in the customer experience and in the customer journey, that filling that gap and actually giving a fully rounded experience made a significant difference in the engagement and in the level of conversion we could ultimately give there. So it was a really nice example of paying attention to little things can really pay off.
Love that. I mean, I think it is a great example, as you say, that only by investigating, and it doesn't sound like a huge fix either. You know, it's not a huge project to
Sure.
fix that small thing, but by taking the time to identify what that unlock is, it contributes to massive uptick in success by just identifying, taking the time to work out what's going to make the change here. And as you say, the company had already invested in this case with a real person behind the scenes to answer these questions in a native language. And yet the front end, the small bit at the front end, was just an oversight that was stopping that process from working, as you say, 200% more effectively, more efficiently. And that's a great unlock. So thank you for sharing that. Lastly, before we run out of time, Kevin, is there anything we haven't talked about today, or anything maybe that you're working on that you'd like to share with our worldwide audience?
One thing I've started recently, I've started creating an online course on maven.com with a good friend of mine, Pavel Sukanik, and we just kicked off last week. I'm really enjoying that. We're working with really interesting group of localization leaders that want to up-level their localization strategy and have a higher impact in their companies to affect international growth and go-to-market adaptation. So really enjoying working through a lot of interesting problems with that group and trying out different strategies. And a couple of them have transitioned into workshops where I'm going to join their company and give a full day workshop in that to help their localization team think through this problem in a different way and actually get some practical tools to move from pure execution to more strategy. So the opportunity is huge, and I'm hoping more and more localization teams will take that leap and embrace it.
Well, there's an invitation. And if people want to connect with you, Kevin, or find out more about the great work you're doing at Global 10X or the courses, where's the best place to point people to? Is it your company website? Is it connect with you on LinkedIn? Where would you like people to reach out to you?
Yeah, LinkedIn is probably the easiest. Look me up on LinkedIn. Equally, my website, global10x.com. They can find more information there. Always happy to talk to people and make new connections.
Well, look, that's lovely. And it brings us nicely to the end of today's show with Kevin O'Donnell. Please make sure that you tune in again to see and or listen to more interesting talks here on the VistaTalks show. We, of course, will be bringing on some new guests to discuss more interesting topics with interesting people just like Kevin from all around the world. But thank you, Kevin. It's been wonderful to catch up with you again today, my friend, and thanks for sharing some great insights and value with our audience.
My pleasure. Thanks, Simon.